I never imagined returning home from a legal summit to find my Bentley Continental GT missing from my own driveway. But even more shocking, unraveling a conspiracy so deep it stretched beyond my quiet neighborhood and into the very heart of a luxury car crime ring. The sun had barely set when I pulled into Brook Hollow Estates, a place known for its pristine lawns, towering iron gates, and an HOA that could make military generals seem lenient. Every house looked identical in a Stepford-esque way, same brick patterns, same driveways, same beige mailboxes. And yet mine stood out that evening, not because of its lush landscaping or polished marble steps, but because something was missing: my Bentley. I slammed the rental's door shut, my mind already racing. I had parked it right there before leaving for the summit. The space where my luxury car had once sat was now hauntingly empty. A knot formed in my stomach. Had I left it somewhere else? No, impossible. Had I forgotten to lock it? No way. Then my eyes landed on the neon orange violation notice stuck to my door. Notice of immediate vehicle removal. Pursuant to Brook Hollow HOA Policy Section 15B, unauthorized vehicles may be subject to immediate removal at the discretion of the HOA board. At the bottom in bold cursive, signed Helen Davenport, HOA President. I gritted my teeth. Helen Davenport, a textbook Karen, if there ever was one. Blonde bob, pearl necklace, and a permanent scowl that could wither a fully grown oak tree. She was the type to demand to speak to the manager of a business she wasn't even a customer at. The queen of unnecessary power trips. And now she had taken my car. Footsteps behind me broke my train of thought. Judge Kensington? I turned to see Walter Briggs, my elderly next-door neighbor, standing by the hedge that separated our properties. His face was lined with worry. Walter had been a detective for 35 years before retiring, and his instincts were sharper than most. "Walter," my voice was sharper than I intended. "Do you know what happened?" He nodded. "They towed it, middle of the night, 2:47 a.m. to be exact." My heart pounded. "Did you see who was driving?" "Oh, I saw more than that." Walter glanced around before stepping closer, lowering his voice. "I was up late. I saw Helen out there directing the tow like a damn movie director. And get this, she wasn't alone." I folded my arms. "Who else was there?" Walter hesitated. "A man, well-dressed, expensive suit, slicked back hair. Didn't recognize him, but he gave off that not-to-be-trusted vibe." Something clicked in my brain. Vincent Blackwood, I knew that name all too well. The owner of Blackwood Auto Group, a luxury dealership downtown. The same man who had been sniffing around my car last year at a charity gala, offering to buy it for a fair price. "You wouldn't happen to have a security camera, would you?" I asked. Walter's lips curled into a smirk, already queued up. I followed Walter into his house, a cozy space cluttered with books, framed newspaper clippings, and a massive security monitor mounted on the wall. He clicked a few buttons, and there it was, a black tow truck rolling in silently at 2:47 a.m. The driver moved fast, securing my Bentley's wheels within 30 seconds, but my eyes weren't on him. They were on Helen, dressed in a silk robe and pearls, standing on the sidewalk with her arms crossed, smirking. Then came the real kicker. A sleek black Jaguar pulled up moments later. The driver stepped out. A man in an expensive gray suit, his dark hair slicked back. Vincent Blackwood. I watched, my pulse hammering in my ears, as Helen and Vincent exchanged a handshake. I could see her lips moving. Walter zoomed in, enhancing the image. I read the words clearly. "Take this one straight to the private lot. No auction." I clenched my fists. She hadn't just towed my car, she had sold it. And she had sold it before I even knew it was gone. Walter exhaled through his nose. This wasn't some HOA violation. This was a planned job. I pulled out my phone, dialing Helen's number, straight to voicemail. "She won't answer," Walter said. "But I got another lead. That tow truck?" He pointed at the company logo on the truck. "Belongs to a company called Elite Repossessions. They operate out of a storage yard in the industrial district. I made some calls. Blackwood uses them." My jaw tightened. Helen Blackwood, a car theft ring masquerading as HOA enforcement. I turned to Walter. "You up for a little field trip?" He grinned. "Thought you'd never ask." We arrived at Elite Repossessions just after midnight. The lot was surrounded by a barbed wire fence, and floodlights illuminated rows of impounded vehicles. We didn't even need to break in, because there it was, my Bentley, parked near the entrance. But something was off. The driver's side window was slightly rolled down, and the door was unlocked. That wasn't normal. If they had towed my car, they wouldn't have my keys. So why did it look like someone had been inside? Walter pulled out his flashlight and scanned the area. Something's not right. They don't just leave stolen cars out in the open. I stepped closer, my eyes narrowing as I peered inside. The dashboard screen was lit up. Someone had been in the car recently. Then I spotted it, a set of duplicate keys sitting in the cup holder. My stomach turned. They made a copy, I muttered. Walter let out a low whistle. That means they were planning on moving it again. They didn't just take your car to store it, someone was about to drive it out of here. I turned to Mikey, the bored-looking employee behind the counter, who was still standing there, pretending he wasn't sweating bullets. "Mikey," I said, my voice level, "who was supposed to pick up this car?" He shook his head fast. "I don't know, man. I just do the paperwork." Walter gave him a look, the kind that probably made criminals confess back when he was still a detective. "Try again." Mikey gulped. He glanced at the back office like he was expecting someone to walk out. "Look, all I know is they were coming to get it tonight. They got an order to transport it out of state. That's all I know, I swear." I clenched my jaw. Helen and Vincent weren't just selling stolen cars locally. They were moving them across state lines. That changed everything. Walter turned to me. "If we wait here, we might just find out who was supposed to pick it up." I nodded. "We're not leaving without answers." 15 minutes passed, then 20. Walter and I sat inside his truck, parked across the street, watching. Mikey had locked the office door and shut off the front lights, but we could still see the Bentley sitting under the lot's floodlights, just waiting. Then, at exactly 1:17 a.m., a sleek black SUV pulled up. I recognized it immediately, a Cadillac Escalade, Helen's car. Walter tensed beside me. Well, look who decided to show up." We watched as Helen Davenport stepped out of the driver's seat. Even in the middle of the night, she was dressed like she was attending a country club brunch, heels, pearl necklace, and an expression of absolute entitlement. Behind her, another figure emerged from the passenger side. This one was taller, dressed in a fitted black suit. His slicked back hair was unmistakable. Vincent Blackwood. I exhaled slowly. "Looks like we just found the heads of the operation." Helen marched toward my Bentley, heels clicking against the pavement, completely unaware that she was being watched. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Walter's truck had a directional microphone installed, one of his retirement hobbies from his detective days. He adjusted the dial, and suddenly we could hear every word. Helen's voice was sharp. "It's still here. Why is it still here? I thought you said it would be out by now." A muffled voice on the other end responded. Vincent crossed his arms. "Relax. We've got time. The truck will be here in 10 minutes. Helen scoffed. "Time is exactly what we don't have. That judge is poking around, and the last thing I need is—" Vincent cut her off. "Then stop acting guilty." Helen sighed. "I just don't like leaving loose ends." I glanced at Walter. This was our chance. I reached for my phone and texted Ted Rodriguez, my journalist contact, who was already waiting outside the lot with his camera crew. "They're here. Get ready." Walter cracked his knuckles. "Let's go crash the party." We stepped out of the truck and walked straight into the floodlights. Helen turned at the sound of approaching footsteps. At first, she squinted, confused. But the moment she recognized me, her entire body stiffened. Vincent's reaction was slower. He took his time turning, his gaze cold and calculating like a man who always had an exit strategy. "Evening," I said, voice calm. "Looking for something?" Helen quickly masked her panic with a tight-lipped smile. "Oh, Judge Kensington. What a surprise." I tilted my head. "Is it? I mean, you did take my car, so I figured I'd come and get it back." She scoffed, straightening her posture. "Your car was removed in accordance with HOA regulations." Walter let out a sharp laugh. "Yeah? Which part of the HOA rules includes selling it to a criminal enterprise?" Helen's mouth opened, but Vincent raised a hand, silencing her. "You don't have proof of anything," he said smoothly. "And unless you have a warrant, I suggest you turn around. I smirked. Funny you should mention that. I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording Walter had captured. Helen's voice echoed through the lot. The judge is poking around, and the last thing I need is... Her face drained of color. Then I added, oh, and by the way, this entire conversation has been live streaming for the past 2 minutes. Say hi to Channel 7 News. A car door slammed. Vincent turned to run, but he never made it. Ted and his news crew stepped out from behind a row of parked cars, cameras rolling. At the same time, blue and red lights flashed as police cruisers pulled into the lot, blocking every exit. Walter smiled. Looks like you're out of time. Helen's hands were shaking now. This is a misunderstanding, she stammered. I was just... The officer closest to her wasn't interested in excuses. Helen Davenport, you're under arrest for grand theft, auto, fraud, and conspiracy to transport stolen vehicles across state lines. I watched as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Vincent tried one last trick, turning to me. You don't want to do this. I have connections. We can work something out. I leaned in close and whispered, you picked the wrong car. The officers dragged them both toward the waiting squad cars. As Helen was shoved inside, she turned to glare at me. You have no idea what you've just done. I gave her a small wave. Oh, I think I do. Walter patted me on the shoulder. Well, that was fun. The flashing police lights painted streaks of red and blue across the impound lot. Helen Davenport sat in the back of a squad car, still sputtering in protest, while Vincent Blackwood was being handcuffed beside her, his carefully composed expression beginning to crack. It should have been over, but it wasn't. A moment later, Ted Rodriguez, investigative journalist, neighborhood watchdog, and the man responsible for breaking more corporate corruption cases than anyone in the city, stepped forward, his camera crew following closely behind. He gave me a nod. Kensington, I think you just blew open something much bigger than a single stolen Bentley. I arched an eyebrow. Bigger how? Ted pulled out his phone and scrolled through his notes. I've been tracking luxury vehicle theft rings for 6 months now. Most of them operate using chop shops, identity fraud, or simple joyriding crews. But this? He gestured at the lot where rows of high-end vehicles were neatly lined up under dim floodlights. This is a long-term business. Walter stepped forward, arms crossed. You're telling me Helen's been running this for longer than we thought? Ted exhaled. Oh, she's not just running it. She's one piece of a network that stretches across multiple states. I felt a chill creep up my spine. Go on. Ted turned to his cameraman. Danny, show them what we found. The cameraman handed him a tablet, and Ted pulled up a map. Red dots were scattered across the screen, clustering in areas known for strict HOA regulations and luxury properties. These are documented cases of vehicle repossession linked to HOA disputes, Ted explained. The pattern's the same every time. A high-end car is flagged for violating HOA rules, then towed in the middle of the night. The owners fight back, but by the time they get through the red tape... He zoomed in on a few dots. The cars are gone. Sold at private auctions, shipped overseas. Some even end up in underground rental markets. Walter whistled. And nobody caught on? Ted's jaw tightened. The victims were mostly wealthy professionals with busy lives, doctors, lawyers, corporate executives. They had the money to fight it in court, but by the time they did, the HOA had buried them in bureaucracy. Meanwhile, their cars had already been laundered through Blackwood's network. I frowned. How did you know it was Blackwood? Ted smirked and pulled out another document. That's the real kicker. See, Vincent Blackwood wasn't just flipping stolen cars. His dealership, Blackwood Auto Group, was quietly partnered with a series of fake vehicle recovery firms. Walter's eyes narrowed. You're saying they didn't just steal cars. They had an entire legal loophole system to make it look legitimate? Ted nodded grimly. Exactly. Blackwood had HOA board members in multiple neighborhoods on his payroll. They'd push through new parking restrictions, sudden rule changes, or ridiculous fines, just enough to justify towing cars legally. Once the vehicle was removed, the paperwork made it look like an abandoned asset. Then they'd resell it. I exhaled sharply. Jesus, Ted continued. And Helen Davenport? She wasn't just a corrupt HOA president. She was a recruiter. Walter's grip on his phone tightened. You mean She trained HOA leaders in other high-end neighborhoods on how to exploit legal loopholes, Ted said. She'd host exclusive HOA management retreats in luxury resorts where she'd teach new board members how to create policies that funneled cars directly into Blackwood's system. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course she did. Helen had always loved control. But now she'd just played herself into a federal investigation. Ted flipped to another set of files. And the money? It wasn't just from selling cars. They had a secondary scheme. I raised an eyebrow. Do I even want to know? Ted sighed. They'd fine residents for supposed violations, overgrown lawns, mailbox colors, whatever. If the resident didn't pay, they'd put liens on their properties. Walter's expression darkened. And if the homeowner refused to pay up, their homes were foreclosed, Ted confirmed. And guess who bought them dirt cheap? I already knew the answer. Blackwood, Ted nodded. They weren't just flipping cars. They were flipping entire neighborhoods. I turned to the lot again, my stomach twisting. This wasn't just about my Bentley anymore. They had ruined lives. Walter cracked his knuckles. So, what's our next move? I looked over at Helen, who was still shouting at the officers as they pushed her into the back of the cruiser. She thought this was over. She thought she could talk her way out of this. She had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone. Ted, you ready to go national with this? Ted's grin was all the answer I needed. Oh, I've been waiting for this moment. He turned to his cameraman. Danny, send everything we have to every major outlet. This story doesn't stop in Brook Hollow. We're blowing this up nationwide. Danny nodded and started making calls. Walter clapped me on the shoulder. And you? I exhaled, my jaw tightening as I stared at Helen's retreating form. I'm going to make some calls, I said. The FBI is going to want to see this. Helen thought she had power. She thought she was untouchable. But she had stolen from the wrong person. And now, the entire empire she built was about to come crashing down. The day of Helen Davenport's trial was a spectacle. Cameras lined the courthouse steps, reporters swarmed like bees to honey, and residents from Brook Hollow Estates, along with victims from across the country, packed the benches inside the courtroom. Helen sat at the defendant's table, wearing a muted gray suit instead of her usual expensive designer outfits. Her perfectly styled Karen bob had lost its volume, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked afraid. Across the aisle, Vincent Blackwood, the man who orchestrated the entire car theft empire, sat in silence, his sharp features unreadable. He had managed to cut a deal with the prosecution, providing evidence that Helen had been the mastermind behind the HOA loophole scam. She was livid about it. Her lawyer tried every trick in the book, arguing that she had been misled, that she was merely enforcing HOA rules, that she had no direct involvement in the stolen car pipeline. But the evidence was overwhelming. The FBI's investigation, sparked by our discovery at Elite Repossessions, had traced millions of dollars in illegal HOA fines, fraudulent home foreclosures, and stolen car sales back to Helen's personal offshore accounts. She hadn't just been stealing cars, she had been stealing homes. Using bogus HOA liens, Helen had systematically forced vulnerable homeowners, elderly widows, immigrants, single parents, and anyone who questioned her rules out of their properties. Once the houses were foreclosed, she had sold them to Blackwood's shell companies at discounted rates. By the time the Department of Justice got involved, Helen was facing RICO charges, racketeering, conspiracy, wire fraud, grand theft auto, and mortgage fraud. When the prosecution laid it all out, the courtroom went silent. The final nail in the coffin? The testimony of Walter Briggs. The retired detective took the stand, his grizzled voice steady as he recounted Helen's direct involvement in stealing my Bentley, as well as multiple other cases he had investigated on his own time. He even revealed that he had planted a hidden audio recorder in Helen's backyard after our confrontation. The tape was played before the jury. Helen's own voice echoed across the courtroom speakers. This isn't about HOA rules, it's about control. These people don't deserve to live in my neighborhood. I'll take every damn car and house I have to until they get the message. The courtroom gasped. Helen's lawyer buried his face in his hands. The verdict took less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for at least 15. As she was escorted out in handcuffs, she turned back toward me and Walter, her face twisted with fury. "This isn't over," she spat. I smirked. "Oh, Helen, it absolutely is." With Helen and Blackwood out of the picture, the FBI launched a full-scale operation across multiple states. Ted Rodriguez's investigative report, aired nationwide, exposed a widespread network of corrupt HOA presidents working with predatory real estate firms and luxury vehicle resellers. By the end of the month, over a dozen corrupt HOAs were completely dismantled. Hundreds of stolen luxury cars were recovered and returned to their rightful owners. Multiple real estate firms were indicted for illegal foreclosures. The National Homeowners Association Board implemented strict federal oversight on HOA operations across the country. Brook Hollow Estates wasn't the only neighborhood affected. Tens of thousands of homeowners across multiple states had been defrauded by this criminal enterprise disguised as HOA policy. By the time the dust settled, the total amount of property stolen had surpassed $150 million. With Helen gone, we elected a new HOA board, this time made up of actual homeowners instead of power-hungry bureaucrats. Walter Briggs was elected HOA president with a simple promise: no more insane rules, no more corruption, no more power trips. Our first act as a new HOA, burning every single ridiculous fine and violation Helen had ever written. The neighborhood changed overnight. People started actually talking to each other instead of living in fear. Kids rode bikes without worrying about sidewalk violations. Neighbors started planting flowers in colors that weren't HOA approved. And best of all, everyone parked their damn cars wherever they wanted. As for me, I got my Bentley back, completely untouched, and I drove it right back into my driveway with Walter and Ted watching. Walter grinned. "Not worried someone might tow it again?" I smirked. "Let them try." For the first time in years, Brook Hollow Estates finally felt like a home again. And Helen? She'd spend the rest of her life behind bars, without a car, without a house, and without a shred of power. Justice had been served, and this time the HOA lost.